Hi guys and welcome to the channel. Today we are working on a pattern welded integral chef's knife in one of my favourite patterns, Twisted W's. So we're going to start this one off with 16 layers of alternating 1080 and 15N20 steel. We start this one off by getting all of our pieces together into a stack. I usually hit one side of one of the strips of steel with a little black paint before cutting them all up to help me keep track of the different steels when stacking them up. And now that we have our stack together, it's time to get this one welded on 4 corners. So we want to weld this really well on each corner and then add a little tack to the top and the bottom layers. Let's chuck on a quick work handle and then it's off to the forge to bring this one up to forge welding temperature. For the first few heats, we don't want to move the material too fast. So just a few small kisses on the press to get the weld set and make sure it's all one solid piece of steel. Once we have it all stuck, I'll start forging the billet down closer to square. And once we get it down to square, I'll rotate the billet 45 degrees and start pressing down on the corners to make kind of an octagonal shape. Now that we have the corners pressed in, it's time to move back to the top and bottom of the billet and start reducing down into a long thin bar. This will give us a C's pattern on the end of the billet, which will form the base of our W's. Once we get our billet down to target thickness, I'll set it aside to cool so we can grind off the scale, ready to restack. Once our billet is cooled, we cut it into 5 pieces, stack it up, and start the forge welding process again. Gently setting the welds, rotating the billet between heats to keep everything as even as possible. This round of forge welding is pretty straightforward. We just need to bring it up to forge welding temperature again, stretch it out into a long bar. This will give us 5 layers of W's on the end of our bar, ready for our last restack. A quick peek at the pattern on the end of the bar tells us we're heading in the right direction, so we can move on to our last stack. So let's cut our billet into 5 pieces again, and once that's tacked together, this should give us 25 layers of W's, which for me seems to be the sweet spot for Twisted W's, giving a great balance between fine and more sparse areas in the pattern, and a great contrast between the steels. Now that we're down to a manageable size bar, it's time to add our twist. For this one, I wanted to get a reasonably tight twist pattern, but I don't have one of those fancy twisting machines, but I'll get it done with some grit and sweat. The billet is still about 30mm in diameter, which doesn't sound that big, but twisting anything this kind of size requires a fair bit of force. I start by trying to get 1 full rotation per heat, keeping it as hot as possible to make the job as manageable as possible. As you continue to twist the piece, you'll notice that it starts to get a tighter twist towards one end. If you alternate each end of the bar as you twist, it definitely helps to keep the twist as even as possible down the length of the billet. We got 7 full rotations into this one, which should be tight enough to give us a pretty cool look. And now that we've struggled through the twist, it's time to actually start making a knife. After pressing the bar back down into some sort of square again, I'll turn the billet on its side to pull down the material to form the heel. And now that we've given the billet some height, it's time to start working on the blade and stretching it out closer to its final length. There is way too much steel here for this knife, but something about twist patterns is that they need to be ground into to expose the pattern. The most interesting pattern is closest to the core, so the more material removed with the grinder, the better. With the basic blade shape formed, it's time to stretch out the material from the bolster to form the tang that goes inside the handle. We already have enough shape to our bolster from the starting billet shape, so all we need to do is pinch out a little tail and we're all done with the forging. And now that we're done with the forging, we'll take a quick trip to the grinder, rip off any excess scale and get it into the hardening. After the quench and a few temper cycles, it's time to turn this into a functional knife. First off is the grinder. We will start with a 36 grit to remove the bulk of the material, then moving up to 60, 120 and an A100 Trizact. We are doing a full flat grind on this knife with a heavy distal taper from the bolster all the way out to the tip. And now that's all ground in and looking good, it's time to move to the hand sanding. Now we did a pretty fair job on the grinder, so we can start at 400 grit moving up to 600. The idea here is that changing the scratch pattern vertically to horizontal gives a nice flowing feel to the piece. Now that that's all looking pretty nice, it's time to move on to the handle. We have a cool block of stabilised orange and black pearl and a G10 spacer. We've got the mortise cut into the handle, now time to get it glued up and start making some dust. After giving the handle a little bit of shape on the grinder, I'll work through the grits hand sanding up to 1500 grit and giving a good hit on the buffer to bring out all that shine. We're on the home stretch now. A few cycles into ferric chloride to expose the pattern in the steel and it's showing really nice contrast. After a few cycles, it's into the coffee bath to make those blacks as deep as we can get them. And there we are, the finished knife. It's a big job, but this pattern gets me every time. It's intriguing, up close with all of the small details, but bold enough from a distance that it's still very striking. I love the weight of an integral bolster knife. It really brings all the weight into the palm of your hand and gives a great feeling of control. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. See you on the next one.